Well, good evening. This is John Sarver from GLREA. Please mute yourself. Wayne, you need to mute yourself. I see you there and you're not muted. Let's see. Let me first thank our sponsors, the State Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy, Homeland Solar, McNaught and McKay, Iron Ridge Racking, and Harvest Solar. And a lot of you I know are members of GLREA. If you're not, would love to have you join. You can join at the website, glrea.org. And we're very hopeful of 2023 being a good year for renewable energy. And boy, you know, I wouldn't even know where to begin to introduce John Barrie, our speaker tonight. He's an architect from Ann Arbor. I've known John basically forever, and because he's been involved in these areas, efficiency and renewables for decades. And he has made a real niche for himself in the appropriate technology area. I always was fascinated to have him come to conferences to make presentations because he was always coming up with something new, and something that wasn't necessarily real pricey, but was very innovative. And so tonight he's going to talk to us about the work he's been doing in Central America, in Guatemala, in the appropriate technology field. And John, go ahead.
Okay, hi everyone. Thank you, John. So tonight I work for a company called the Appropriate Technology Collaborative, and we design technologies for low-income people in developing countries. We've designed over a dozen new products that are in use in countries in over 50 countries around the world. And they're inexpensive and they improve the quality of life for low-income people. I'm going to focus exclusively on solar tonight because, you know, GLREA and that's the focus for tonight. So, and I'm going to cover, let's see, I'm going to cover solar home systems. We work in Guatemala, and the area that we work in is the poorest part of the Americas. And it's the second poorest country in the hemisphere, with the exception of Haiti. Haiti is the poorest country in the hemisphere. And then we're going to talk about solar schools, which are really solar community centers. And these are all in rural parts of Guatemala where there is no electricity, and there's likely not to be electricity for another several decades. You know, they've gone this long without power or anybody coming in, and it's likely that in my lifetime or in the lifetime of the people that we serve, that they'll never see actual grid-tied power. So two focuses: solar home systems, which are small scale, and solar schools, which become community centers and really become an asset for a community. So with that, I'll start the slideshow. If you look at the date on this slide, we were well into it by 2008, designing. We had created a solar vaccine refrigerator at this point that you could make out of parts that you could find in a scrapyard. And it doesn't use electricity. It doesn't even use the solar panels. It doesn't use electricity of any kind. It just uses heat from the sun to make things cold. It's for vaccines, and it's in use in India primarily. There's a company that actually makes them in India. But I'm focusing on solar for this one. This is one of our early solar installations. And if you look at the ceiling in this house, by the way, the combination of kerosene lamps, and right above the woman in the pink sweater, you can see a kerosene lamp, which is just a bottle with a wick in it, right next to that creosote-soaked beam. So when they light that up, they run the risk of burning everything down every night. And so we installed, this is one of our early solar installations, and and we reduced the smoke load And we also got her a stove that has a flue so the smoke goes out of the house. Imagine children living here and breathing this stuff all of their lives. Yeah, the number one cause of death in children worldwide between the ages of 6 months and 5 years is pulmonary disease caused by indoor air pollution, caused by smoke. This is what we're fighting, is kerosene lamps and candles. Candles are actually pretty toxic too. I know they're, people like candles in their houses and things, but they put off a lot of soot, and they're a unusually large source of carbon emissions. Kerosene lamps are amazing sources of carbon emissions, by the way. A single poor person's home in residential rural Guatemala puts out over a ton of carbon dioxide if they're using kerosene and candles to see at night. Per year, ton of carbon dioxide per year. It seems impossible, but I've read many studies of this. It's well established. So getting these things out of people's houses, which, by the way, people spend money on this. Kerosene and candles cost between $2.50 a week and $4.40. We actually had one family spending close to $17 because they were per week on candles because they were working at home at night. And with one solar power system that they could pay off in about 10 weeks, they increased their productivity. At the same time, they decreased their emissions. So, oh yeah, this is my favorite kerosene lamp, the one that will burn the house down eventually. I'm surprised it was still standing when we were there. Anyway, so back in 2007, 2008, LED light bulb cost a lot, so we had to make our own if we were going to make these things affordable. We knew that LED lights were more efficient than compact fluorescent lights. Plus, they weren't toxic. They don't have mercury in them. And so we designed our own LED light bulbs and also our own circuit boards to control the voltage and make it so that they were as efficient as possible while not burning out. These are early days of LEDs being used. Look at this. A single watt LED bulb is $23.99. Okay, that's what we're fighting against. So it was worth it to make our own light bulbs. So we designed our own circuit board. Actually, the guys in Guatemala that I'm working with, these engineers down there, we met young engineers that are out to save the world, that are as brilliant as can be, and they came up with a circuit board design based on what my friend Jim Reese came up with originally. There's my college roommate, Jim Reese, with the first circuit board for the LED, our own personal LED bulbs. We actually made our own circuit boards in Guatemala and made our own light bulbs. Now, this is a solar installation with a lead acid battery, old technology. And if you look right there in the center of this, that's an outlet like from a cigarette lighter in a car. It's a 12-volt outlet. This is before USB. So if you wanted to give people access to electricity in their own home, other than having a light bulb in the ceiling, this is the type of outlet that was common. And so we put these small scale systems in, 5 and 10 watt systems with an option for charging a cell phone with a cigarette lighter outlet. I came back to one of these houses a year later, and I found this 12-volt television sitting on a shelf. And what they were doing is they were saving their precious watt hours of electricity and waiting until they had enough to watch like Real Housewives or something. And so, like, you can give people or create the circumstances where they can take their first steps out of poverty by having light and being able to study at night. But some people want to watch Real Housewives, and we can't control what people do once they get the power. So the lesson here is I'm going to talk about all the cool things that solar power does for rural people. It does it for rural people who want to do something really cool with solar power. It doesn't do it for everyone. So remember that TV, because I do. So this is more like what we do nowadays. We have, we promote what I would call large scale for residential international humanitarian development solar power systems. They're 10-watt solar power systems. So we have a solar panel that's about the size of a laptop. And we have 3 light bulbs, 3 LED light bulbs in the house, and a radio that comes with the system. And it also has a player. You can put a USB music thing in there. And most of the people that like those kids there know how to use the USB music system. I don't. So anyway, this changes a lot of things by getting solar power to somebody's house. They no longer put off a ton of carbon dioxide per year for the household. The children have better nutrition. They save money. You know, I told you that $2.50 to $5 spent on kerosene and candles, no longer spent on kerosene and candles. They save that money and they make more money. It's surprising what a few watts of power can do for a family. So kids study at night for the first time. Girls stay in school longer in particular because they don't have to go and charge the family cell phone. This is the family that actually makes something at night. They were doing this by candlelight. They're making thread and yarn for Guatemalan fabrics. These are natural dyed products. And they put a lot of time in every evening, and they were spending about $17 a week, which they no longer have to spend on candles and kerosene. So people, this is the other side of the television, right? You can choose to do this. You can choose to watch Jersey Shores. And this is what people do. Types of businesses and income generation is that people charge a phone for other people. What's really important there is the little girls don't have to carry the family cell phone from their house to the nearby village and wait there for the phone to charge, then carry it back. Everybody has a cell phone in Guatemala. You can get a used phone in the market, you know, not a fancy one, but you can get a used phone in the market for $2. You can receive phone calls for free. Everybody has a phone and it's on all the time. However, phones need to be charged, and little girls are the ones that are assigned the task of charging the phone. So once you get solar power to somebody's house, the girls no longer miss a day of school every 3 days, and they stay in school longer. We 15 years of this. We have data to back this up. People make people make shops out of their houses often to sell simple products to people going by, either produce or there's a lot of really simple things that you can purchase and resell. And bar and restaurant, guess what? People, you know, open a window on the side of their house and sell beer out the window. I may have a picture of that. Let's see if I do. Oh, okay. Anyway, businesses, phone charging, creating a shop or a bar or restaurant. Those are what people do with the extra light that they have. Being able to see at night is a big deal. If you have light at your house or a light outside your house underneath the awning, for example, people will stop by. You are the brightest thing for miles around. People can see you from across a valley. People can see you from miles away because you are the only thing that's really illuminated bright enough. So I wanted to show this. These are houses that were just houses until they got solar lights. The one on the left-hand side really went to town with their business, and they do. That furniture out there is filled at night, and people come by and they have a beer and they talk, and it's a community gathering spot. And the one on the right-hand side is just somebody's opened up a little store out of their house. And if you look at this, this is what they're selling on the inside. There's snacks. These are like chips. And they're really terrible chips, by the way. I've had more bags of those things than I care to count. But that's what they're selling. Notice the bed there. This is their living room. They cut a hole in the wall. There's not even a screen for that. They cut a hole in the wall. They started selling these things because that, if you look at the top there, they have one LED light bulb there and they have an LED light bulb outside. They sell eggs. They sell cleaning products, feminine hygiene products, and they sell it all out of their living room. And this family, they're industrious and they are making more money than they did before. So they're saving money and they're making more money. And these things are inexpensive, relatively speaking. And people who have pre-existing businesses, they stay open longer. They believe they have, this is a survey, a better customer experience. They're attracting additional customers. I'll tell you, if you had one of those stores and you didn't have a light on it, nobody after dark is going to stop by. And overall increased productivity. Sorry for the repeat slide there. And what they feel like, by the way, as a household is, this is a survey where people came up with the answers. They were just simply asked, what's better? And my phone is always available. I feel safer. I get that a lot when I talk to people that I visit a lot of these projects, and I feel safer comes up a lot. It's a quality of life issue. Okay, spend less time traveling to buy sources of light, charge the phone. They're not buying kerosene. They're not sending the girls to charge the phone. By the way, girls are also the only ones that get water. If you live away from a water supply, girls carry water on their heads in big jugs, and it's never the boys. And so these interventions that we have really are focused on improving the life quality for women in particular. Health is improved. I'll tell you, kerosene lamps put off a large amount of pretty toxic smoke, especially those raw wick kerosene lamps that I showed you in that earlier slide. And children have time to do their homework. It's years more school. It's about 3 years more school. Every year more school, by the way, closely corresponds with higher lifetime income. So this is out of poverty with one intervention in one generation. I can watch TV down there at the bottom, second to the bottom. I can watch TV. So that is, 33% of the people report that. And also with additional budget, they spend money on education. They spend money on getting their kids educated and better nutrition. In the part of Guatemala where we work, over 50% of the children are malnourished. They stunted because they don't have proper nutrition, particularly in the first 1,000 days of life. And when you're stunted, that means that your body doesn't develop fully, and it means that your brain doesn't develop fully. So you're trapped in poverty for another generation. And it's a tragedy. And to be able to get food to kids so that they're not growing up stunted is one of the strongest things you can do to improve the quality of life. And actually, there's an environmental component of that also. When families get electricity and can see at night for the first time and have better food and education, but see at night for the first time in particular, they have smaller families. They choose to have fewer children. And so, it's because they can do other things at night. Over time, over generations, that's a huge impact. Every person, a poor person, Guatemala represents about 6 tons of carbon dioxide a year. And so if a family's 2 kids smaller, that's a lot of carbon dioxide that doesn't get developed. And then they tend to have smaller families because they're richer. They have higher income because they've gone to school longer. And so they tend to have smaller families. They tend to have electricity. So generation after generation, there's fewer kids, there's less emissions, and the environment's better. So, and the family save money, et cetera. You've been able to read this while I've been yammering. So we show up in the middle of nowhere. Actually, we show up in the middle of nowhere at the request of a community. And the community has to sign commitments for maintenance of systems, setting money aside so that batteries can be replaced. There's a long vetting process for a community to get solar power for a school, for example. And we believe in larger systems than most humanitarian organizations, and it's because they have such significant impacts on the quality of life. We also do something called WASH training. That's it's an acronym for something, but what it is it's about learning about hygiene and washing your hands and keeping things clean so that you don't either pass along pathogens from polluted water or just the sicknesses that you could have from not washing your hands. We also, if we're going to get into the field and into somebody's house or into a school, the incremental additional cost of getting a family a water filter so that the kids don't have waterborne parasites is trivial. And the fact that most international nonprofits focus on one thing, you know, is beyond me, excuse me. It's just, it boggles my mind that you can spend all of the money to get to the point where you're working with a family in a rural setting. That takes years to get there. And then you hand off a 5-watt solar light or you know, something to replace a candle, and you don't do wash training, you don't use water filters. Water filters only cost $10 each. I can get a 1-million-gallon water filter for $10. That's a lifetime of clean water for a family. It's criminal not, in my mind, it's criminal not to do that. So water filters go to people, and medical screening, basic health meds. One of it is that kids need to be dewormed if they get water filters, because those worms aren't going away unless something happens. So you have to get rid of the parasites that the kids already have when you are the first people there to do something like this. This is a tragedy. During COVID, nonprofit that gets solar power to families, and they're big. They said that they were out of the game because of COVID in Guatemala, and we were still working with with masks and with proper hygiene in place. And they said, can you get our solar power systems to these families? And they were getting these little solar lamps to kids. And these are little, you put them out in the sunlight during the day, you take them in, they're better than a candle, okay? That's clearly better than a candle. After 3 months, these things all failed. 3 months, little solar lamps. Now this other company is a very large, by our standards, very large company that promotes their solar program. And what we ended up doing is hurting ourselves. We hurt our reputation by getting these things. And also this spoils people so that they don't believe in solar power. So we've ameliorated this, but it cost us a lot of money to do that because we had to bring back and say, yeah, that was a crummy lamp and here's a good one on our own dime. So anyway, that is a failure. And the failure on our part was accepting this as a task for another nonprofit. So we use these 10-watt solar power systems. Some have lead acid batteries. We're right at the cusp of switching over to lithium batteries for these systems. We at the Appropriate Technology Collaborative designed a system that looks remarkably like this, that has batteries that last 20 years. right now, the average battery life for these systems, they're designed like the cell phone. They're designed to have a battery that lasts 3 to 5 years. And with a little change in how the batteries are charged and discharged, you can stretch a battery's life out to 20 years, where at 20 years, it has 80% of its original capacity, just like solar panels. So you can get the battery. The deal is solar panels last pretty much forever, or they last, a generation. The electronics last a generation. LED light bulbs, I don't know if they ever fail anymore. I mean, they just pretty much go on forever, but the batteries give up. So we decided to design our own battery system that lasts 20 years. It's one of those things where, like, if you're going to get into the field and do something, you should do something that really has long-lasting value. So we're a little different than the other organizations that way. So our rural development model is that there's several high-impact interventions that you can bring to a rural community. You have to get them to buy in. You have to get them to sign documents. We also then, our team in Guatemala actually calls once a month to these rural centers and finds out how things are going. So there's continual follow-up on these systems. So solar home systems, not cheap systems, as I said before. And I'll move on from this one. So here is getting to the job site for solar schools. I've ranted long enough about homes, residential solar. It's been very successful as an intervention in poverty. We've seen families out of poverty in the 15 years that we've been doing that. We've seen several families, they've moved to new houses. They're, in addition to saving money, they make more money. So here is traveling to one of our rural communities in a 4x4 pickup truck. It took me 8 hours to get from the town where we have our office to the closest town to where we're working. The last 4 miles took 4 hours in a truck with chains on the tires. And we were going over boulders that were the size of basketballs and slipping through mud with a cliff. There's a cliff on the right-hand side that goes straight down for about, well, it looks like 1,000 feet, but it's probably 100 feet. Scared the daylights out of me. We managed to get those trucks, when the one on the right backed up a little bit, we didn't even stop. We saw that they were backing up and we just shot between them. I swear we were close to clipping both rear view mirrors as we shot between the trucks. I had a great driver. By the way, I don't drive in Guatemala. If you had ever been there, you'd understand why. And this is like the communities that we serve. This is homes near one of the school projects that we just recently did. I was in this community last year. There's one of our big solar power systems. If you came here to see lots of solar panels, you can turn it off now, because this is 3 to 6 solar panels. We're talking about 900 to 2,000 watts of solar power are the range of solar power systems we put into schools. And the goal with the schools is to have lights in every classroom that are bright enough to be able to study by, to read by. During the rainy season, it gets very dark. And also at night, people need to be able to meet in a community. And then to run a computer lab. For rural kids, learning how to use a computer and being able to learn the Excel and Word and those sorts of things, it helps them keep up with their city counterparts. They have a better chance at getting a good job if they know computers, have computer skills. So we get donated laptops, and now we're getting inexpensive laptop computers. There was a problem with donated laptops that if we have time, I'll go into. But this is one of our solar skills. This was cool because this school system, they ran wires, the community ran wires from the main school over to 3 other buildings just for light bulbs for the buildings. So they strung up wires on poles to get between buildings so that they could have 4 buildings total with electric lights, and only 1 building has outlets. We try to limit every way we possibly can. We try to limit the amount of electricity people use. What happens, by the way, in these schools, and I should have a picture of it, it's so cool, is the day we turn the lights on, somebody brings an outlet strip or 2 or 3, and everybody in this community is charging their cell phones. I mean, if you turn the lights on at 9 a.m., by 10 a.m., all of the sockets are full with cell phone chargers, and little girls get to go to school. So this one, you see, we got a bunch of LED lights lit, 1 inkjet printer. By the way, this school pays for its maintenance by selling copies and prints from their inkjet printer. And also they have movie night on Fridays where you pay 12.5 cents to see a movie, and then you can buy popcorn for 12.5 cents. And it's a big community event. It's it's a pirated movie, on a DVD. Remember those things? Anyway, it becomes a thing for the community, and it's also a source of income for the school so that they can afford to replace batteries when batteries need to be replaced. So yeah, pictures of our huge solar power system. And one of the additional buildings, I was kind of freaked out when I got here because they didn't tell me ahead of time that they were wiring up more buildings to this. Our team in Guatemala is now independent. They are running their own show. They're a registered nonprofit in Guatemala. We started them. We helped create the program with local people, and the goal always has been that once things are running well, we step back and they run the show. And one of the first things that happened, well, in the first year, what happened was when we stepped back, they became registered in Guatemala, is that they doubled in size. And so we were really holding them back. So, I sound like this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Sliced bread comes from the people that we're serving. So these are the buildings that got powered up. And they provided food and labor for the project. I can't see on the side of the screen here. Is there a picture of the guy standing next to the power pole that they put up? Cool. Yeah. That was a surprise. By the way, this is a traditional way of cooking. A lot of homes where we work have a pot on top of some stones and then wood that gets shoved in underneath to create the heat for cooking. It's called a 3-stone fire. You have 3 stones, put a pot on top, wood underneath. I'd say over half the houses that we serve, they're cooking on the floor like this, and they're using oil lamps. That's like living in the Middle Ages. In the Middle Ages, people cooked on the floor, and in the Middle Ages, people used oil lamps to see. With solar power, they move into the 21st century. They're charging a cell phone. They have LED lights. They can flick a switch and lights go on without having to light something on fire. Kids don't get burned by things. We also have a program for getting clean burning cook stoves into people's houses. That's a different program. So we also train people. Oh, I don't have enough pictures of training people. We spend a lot of time training the school staff and community members on how solar power systems work so that they can maintain their own solar power system. Once again, they're called once a month to find out how things are going. And there are times we have to troubleshoot things. There are times things fail. There are times the batteries are running down and they don't know why. And so returning to the field, taking that last 4 miles is a challenge. I'm going to go a little faster here. So yeah, these are the schools that we serve. That's about the average size of a school. And this is what happens when we get some donated laptops to go in one of these buildings. It really is bringing a rural area into the 21st century. These kids will have a much better chance at not being poor because they have this opportunity. Oh, this is the training video. We train everybody, the school staff and members of the community. They have to sign up to take our classes to learn how solar power works. so that we have people who can maintain systems and understand what we're talking about. When we say you need to check the inverter, something like that. This is the WASH training program. These women are actually just about to graduate from the WASH training program to get certificates. Our programs were recognized by the United Nations as addressing 8 of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which was really nice because they came to us. And they also awarded us the Sustainia Award as one of the top 100 sustainable enterprises worldwide in 2016. And in 2019, we got the Energy Globe Award for Guatemala, which is another fancy pants award for work in renewable energy. And that is it. We survived it, everybody. And I can unshare my screen. Now I can see people.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, we can see everybody. So if you want to, raise your hand, by hitting below the reactions, that's fine. Or if you just want to unmute and just raise your hand, that's fine too, because we can see everybody. We have a relatively small group tonight. So who's got the first question?
Well, John, would you like to tell people how they can be participants?
We do have volunteer projects in Guatemala where people get to come down and install solar power with us. They help pay for the solar power systems. They're not huge solar power systems, but they help pay for them. They don't cover the full cost. I'm actually traveling to Guatemala on the 27th of December to join a group that are volunteering to install solar on several houses and one school project. That happens about 4 times a year now. We cut it for COVID. We're just bringing that program back. We also have a program for university students that, spring break, come to Guatemala, install solar, or design a new technology and come to our workshop and prototype it in Guatemala. So those are opportunities that we have for people.
And how long are your trips, John? I mean, how long do people go down to Guatemala?
There's 2 types of volunteer that we host. One is like a 9-day trip. You arrive on Saturday and you leave the following Sunday. So 9 days total. And that's for like a solar installation and a little bit more. Like this trip, we'll install solar on a school, hit some houses. And the other one is we have we have interns that work with us, and they work for a minimum of 3 months.
Gotcha.
Sometimes we've had interns work for years with us.
Oh, okay. Dave, go ahead. Dave Curtis.
Yeah, thank you very much, John. Brings a little bit of a tear to my eye to see what you're doing. I wonder if there's a language barrier, and what is the possibility of this sort of stuff being done in the United States, because we know it needs it.
So language barrier, that's a great question. Where we're working, the primary language isn't Spanish. Okay, I speak Spanish, sort of pidgin Spanish. I speak Spanish okay. But the primary language, the first language, is Quiche, where we're working. And it's one of the 20 living indigenous languages in Guatemala. And so I know some words in Quiche, but what happens is that everybody, Spanish is my second language, and it's their second language too. So we all speak Spanish slowly. And it gives me a fighting chance of actually understanding what people are saying. Doing it in the United States, we have a fledgling program of teaching solar in Southeast Michigan, and working with kids from Detroit and Ypsilanti right now. And that is also something that's just recovering from COVID.
Hey, go ahead, Tom.
John, I was interested by your model that you're using to sort of develop this, has there been any indication that it is a spreading kind of model where other organizations are picking up that strategy and you're getting a multiple effect, not just your own, but others who might be following that model and trying to do their own areas? And how extensive has the impact been? In other words, you're working with a limited village or villages kind of situation. Are there tons of places that are there to be able to use the model on?
Yeah, we're not going to run out of places in Guatemala, but I'd like to spread further. I'm consulting on projects in Africa and in India right now, promoting what we do. I can't say that we have as much traction as I'd like. I often speak to nonprofits. I speak to nonprofits, or people starting programs that are similar to what we do a couple times a year, maybe 4 times a year. And they're really interested in getting a $12 solar lantern into somebody's hands. They build an entire infrastructure around, and including one group had 6 employees before they had 1 lamp in the field. And they were building it around getting the cheapest solar lamps to the greatest number of people. I tried desperately to talk them out of it. They're also well funded, by the way. They got government funding from the British government. So some success, Tom, not as much as I'd like to see.
Well, John, I'm kind of curious, why Guatemala? What got you started in Guatemala as opposed to Nicaragua or wherever?
We visited Nicaragua and Costa Rica, several Latin American countries, because I speak some Spanish. I spoke Spanish when I was a kid. And then I heard a friend of mine who was a tech reporter for National Public Radio, and she said to me, she said that there was this group of young engineers in Guatemala that were doing exactly what I wanted to do. Why don't you meet them? And so I hopped on a plane and went down there, and we're still working with them. So that's been it. So yeah, a tech reporter for National Public Radio, and one good recommendation. And the guy who can design, when we did our lights, we had to print our own circuit boards. And this guy, Jose Ordonez in Guatemala, could actually hack an Epson print. First of all, he designed the circuit himself. He designed much more complicated circuits. He designed inverters and things, and then printed the circuit boards himself by hacking an Epson printer, and then drilled them out with a little Dremel Moto tool drill, and then soldered in the resistors and transistors and capacitors and things. And so we did our own circuit boards because we had that type of talent down there. Before working with us, by the way, Jose was selling flowers in the market with his family because he couldn't get a job as an engineer because the economy was so bad. So this is a brilliant engineer who ended up giving a TED talk in Africa, and he was selling flowers in the market. So that's, yeah, the people that I work with are much better at this than I am.
John, how is Rotary International involved?
We get a fair number. We get a grant probably every year from Rotary for some sort of project. Rotary, actually, we have a program called Mayan Power and Light. And that's the one that won, that's the program that won the awards from the United Nations. And that was funded by Rotary International, a group out of British Columbia. I can't remember the town in British Columbia, actually funded that program. So Rotary's been great. Rotary, I'm surprised. People should know this. Every Rotary club is like a small foundation, and they can get and they support international humanitarian projects. And I'm a member of a Rotary club in Guatemala, and so I zoom in for the meetings. I was there about 5 months out of the year at one point, and so it made sense for me to be a Rotary member in Guatemala. So they have been great. They understand the process, and their rules for international projects are surprisingly well thought out. You know, I talk about how things don't quite work and some international groups really screw things up. The rules for a Rotary project are really very good.
Hey, John, do you have any issues down there with crime or systems being stolen, or just?
Not at all. We've done, 1,000 installations, the small ones, right? Not one solar panel has ever been stolen, period. So these are valuable things sitting on people's roofs, often hardly attached at all, maybe a zip tie holding it down. So it's eminently stealable, and it's just not part of the culture in the area of Guatemala where we work. Now, Guatemala City has gangs and things like that, and I'm sure that things would be different there. But where we work, nobody steals anything. And I just feel so fortunate to not having to worry about that. Also, the government has been, originally we tried to fly under the government radar. And then it turns out that the local governments in these 6 different departments like a state in Guatemala, the local governments or the state governments in these 6 different states where we're working love us. They want to support us. They say, bring your, like when we were doing Zoom classes, because we teach a lot of solar. We teach more solar than we actually do solar projects. Teaching business, we teach Mayan women about electricity, circuits, and solar power, and then carpentry skills, and then we help them start small scale solar businesses. So that's like our main act. And they provide the space and the Wi-Fi so these women can like travel only, an hour to get to someplace, or they can take a class, especially during COVID. That was just a godsend. So the government's been helpful. And we should have been working with them. Once again, it's the Guatemala team that figured that out. I never could have figured that out. I'm a gringo from outside. I have limited capacity to interface with the culture. And so having Guatemalans have been lead on everything down there pretty much since the beginning. And that's been one of the wise choices. If we've made wise choices, that's probably the leading wise choice that we've made.
John, you mentioned wanting to branch out into other countries. Have you gotten into other Central American countries?
I'm going to El Salvador in January, and we've done a little bit in Honduras. We've worked in Nicaragua. We've worked in India. And then we have student teams from around the world. So, but right now in Latin America, we could expand more. And I'd like to. That's the El Salvador trip.
We should talk. Our local Rotary Club here in Blissfield has been working in Nicaragua, in San Juan del Sur.
Okay.
And it kind of stalled during COVID. But I think it may be time to dust that off and get moving again. We've donated ambulances and fire engines and all kinds of things down there to that community.
We've done, earlier on, we did several projects in Nicaragua, including biomedical engineering projects, working with student teams to design new technologies for biomedical purposes. By the way, engineering students are so much brighter and have so much more capacity than when I was a student. And also from when I used to teach engineering at the University of Michigan. And they are so far ahead of what we were able to do than when I taught there and when I was a student there. It's just day and night different. So we have these brilliant students coming down there that can do, it's like magic. It's like magic to me. So Good question, Frank. And yes, we should get together. I give talks to Rotary clubs about once a month. Have me speak at your club.
Yeah, I think we could do that easily.
Okay.
Always looking for a good program, and this one would dovetail nicely into our efforts in that regard. The only other question I'd have is relates to that. You know, the political situation in Nicaragua has been less than ideal for many years now. Do you see any issues with politics in these Central American countries?
Well, we, for a long time, flew under radar, and so we can do that there. Actually, we have a partner nonprofit in Nicaragua that's been there for 30 years. And so we're happy to join forces with what I call high functioning nonprofits, nonprofits that don't do silly things. So that helps a lot. That opens a lot of doors for you when you have like-minded people working together for a common goal. So a nonprofit that grows organic cotton and sells it in the United States, for example, we've worked with them to provide electricity to a small group of people that live in the communities where they work. And
Yeah, let's talk.
yeah, we can talk.
John Richter put a question in the chat room about, how do they connect to the internet? Do they have Wi-Fi?
One of the things I discovered when I went to Guatemala is that they have a better cell phone service than we have here. And they never had landlines to speak of. When I first went to Guatemala, they had 2 landlines in one of the main cities, 2 landlines in the 1990s, 2 landlines, and then they went all to cell phones. The disadvantage of that is there's no vista so serene or so beautiful that you can't put a cell phone tower on it. So there's cell phone towers on churches. There's cell phone towers on this beautiful volcano and mountains, and it's like a national park with cell phone towers. To me it spoils the view, but boy, do you have good service. So I guess I can't argue, because cell phone service, it makes money for people. Farmers get to know, especially these peasant farmers, get to find out how much a bag of grade A coffee beans is worth, rather than getting took by a middleman. You can actually text in and find out on a little teeny phone that just has texting. You can find out the going price that day for selling coffee. And so that's a big deal.
Yeah, well, let's see. We've got time for a few more questions before we break at 8. Any more comments or questions from folks?
John, what's your current contact information?
Oh, it's probably what you have, Frank.
Do you think it's still good?
I don't know. Actually, it's.
I'll take a look real quick.
I'll give you the easy one. J.S. Barrie, B-A-R-R-I-E, at Gmail. Want me to do that again?
JSBARRIE.
Yeah.
Gmail.
Yeah. Juliet, Sierra, Bravo, Alpha, Romeo, Romeo, India, Echo.
Now you're showing off.
Yeah, I was a pilot for a while.
Well, John, thank you very much. This has been a fantastic presentation. We appreciate you spending an evening
Thank
with us and telling us about the, I think it's just a fascinating story what you've been doing down there in Guatemala. And I'll just mention that, we're going to be not going to have a program next week or the week after because of the holidays. But probably a lot of you get emails announcing these programs through various ways. So once we have a new program scheduled, you'll get the word out. And Yeah, thanks for everybody for attending. Enjoy the holidays. And John, thank you very much. Yes,
One more question I might be able to get. Is Dave Curtis? You,
Dave, did you have a
Yep,
question?
yep. Well, more for John Sarver.
okay.
Do you think we'll be live in person at some point soon?
Well, not for these presentations, but at GLREA, we have started talking about doing in-person programs again. I think we'll continue to do the Thursday evening Zooms just because it makes it easy to reach statewide and get presenters to, but we have started talking about actually having in-person gatherings in addition to these Thursday evening Zooms. So yeah, that's the COVID thing is kind of come and gone. So we've been a little cautious about getting people together because we know people are still pretty hesitant, or some people are at least. Yeah.
I'd like to do one more self-promotion, if you don't mind. I teach solar classes just for free. They're completely unlinked to any sales at all. It's an introduction to solar power and what you might want to do to get solar power in your house. And it's mostly, I make a presentation and then the Q&A is where all the action is. It's really exciting. It's really a lot of fun. There's so many people out there that know more than I do and want to attend these things. So I sort of host get together has some structure to it, and some of it is Q&A that's really a lot of fun. And I'll be starting again in February after I get back from Guatemala, and I'll and maybe I can let you know, John, when it's going to happen. It's free, and it's absolutely not associated with any sales at all. It's sales free.
Yeah, let me know, John, because I'll try to
Okay.
get the word out. Well, thank you, everybody, for attending, and
Yeah,
enjoy the
thank you, everybody.
holidays.
It's been fun.
Yeah, take care, everybody.